So what is human factors all about, right? What are the goals? What are the objectives? What are we trying to achieve when we're applying human factors to a system or a product? Well, practitioners typically agree that there are three main goals of human factors. And these are outlined in your book as well, so take a look. The first is to enhance performance. The second is to enhance or improve safety. And then the third is to enhance or improve user satisfaction or likability of a system. Okay, so human factors is generally interested in understanding what factors can enhance these three things. And we're also interested in understanding what tools we can use to help us improve these three things. You should be aware, however, that it sometimes can be difficult to do all three things equally well. We're always trying to optimize performance and safety and user satisfaction all together. If we can do all that together, that's the holy grail. But often we have to make trade-offs. So for example, you use a seatbelt in your car, don't you? And you do that as a safety measure to enhance safety. The problem is it kind of can be a pain in the rear end sometimes. It slows you down. It's an extra step you have to do when you get in the car. Kind of constrains you sometimes when you're, reaching for your drink or whatever. So there's a trade-off. Same thing with human performance. Pilots in the cockpit use checklists to help them make sure that they don't forget any critical step before taking off in the aircraft, right? They're doing this to optimize their to enhance their safety. But as a result, it kind of slows them down. It's an extra step that has to be done and impacts turnaround time. Medical domains have to deal with this as well. So again, just something to keep in mind that there are trade-offs, and our challenge as engineers and human factors engineers specifically is to design solutions that can both enhance safety but also achieve high levels of performance and user satisfaction. Okay, so you may have seen this graphic in your textbook already. The reason I wanted to put it here is just to emphasize and reiterate a very simple concept, and that is, as system engineers, we are responsible for monitoring and optimizing the performance of overall systems. But we have to recognize that people are a part of these systems that we're managing. And so when we're monitoring system performance, we're also monitoring the human performance as part of that system. So that means we're interested in monitoring and optimizing their environment. We're interested in monitoring and optimizing the equipment and tools with which they're doing their jobs. We're interested in optimizing the task itself and the jobs and how these people are able to perform their jobs. We're interested in considering what types of training people receive to do these jobs and even selecting the people to do their jobs. One thing that's not mentioned here is that as engineers, we should also be concerned with understanding and optimizing the teams and the organizational design in which people work. So that's crew pairing, and that's also considers things like organizational culture. All of these things together have a huge impact on how people do their jobs, how people perform, how people stay safe, and their satisfaction with the tools and products that we're designing. Okay, a couple last points I wanted to make as we start to wrap up this chapter. This is your first experience, I think, to human factors as a discipline generally. At this point, you guys have an engineering background, but I wanted to point out that human factors is one of those things that's very interesting because it kind of transcends just engineering. It transcends a specific discipline. If you go off to work in the world, you may encounter human factors kind of concepts and ideas in different forms. A couple of them take the name or take the shape of different jobs. So you could be a human factors engineer, for example. You could also go into the field of ergonomics, which refers to the idea of physical work and how people physically interact with the spaces around them. You could go into engineering psychology, which kind of focuses on, the neck up, understanding in a general sense how people make decisions and how cognitive processes work. You could go into human-machine interaction, which looks at interface design, like app design and usability and user experience. You could go into cognitive engineering, or even something like industrial or organizational psychology. All of these are kind of really interesting fields that take a different approach or a different kind of view of human factors. Okay, so fast forward to the end of the semester, and you've taken the whole class, and you say to yourself, wow, I kind of like this. Yeah, I think this is something that I could do. Where can I find a job in human factors? Well, a lot of folks in human factors end up working in places like colleges or universities. Also, the military is a great avenue to look for HF-related jobs. So look specifically for military research facilities or environments like that. Software industry is a great area. Look for companies like IBM and Microsoft and Google and Facebook. They're looking for user-centered design engineers or UX designers or interface designers. If you're interested in kind of the more traditional controls and displays application, you might consider applying human factors to more hardware design, in which case you might look at companies like Apple or Samsung, Sony, Motorola, Dell. I think actually Clemson has a unique partnership with Samsung, so there may be some opportunities there. There's always jobs in consulting, so human factors or human error consulting. You can always find a job, I shouldn't say always, but there are a great many jobs available in traditional industry if you take a safety route. So oftentimes safety professionals will have a background in HF, or there'll be at least opportunities to apply HF principles to safety. So they'll be called safety managers or EHS managers, environmental health and safety. And then lastly, if you're really interested in more of the research side, you could always look at federal agencies like NIOSH or the CDC or NIH. Okay, lastly, something to keep in mind. I wanted to share these stats with you. The Department of Labor listed human factors engineering as one of the 8 emerging careers, a couple of years ago. And so they said that, human factors engineers typically get an annual wage of about $78,000, $79,000. HFES, which is the Human Factors Ergonomics Society, which is our industrial society, did some surveys and found that the base salary for a human factors ergonomics professional was actually more like $128,000, $129,000, and that was done in 2017. I would keep in mind, however, that HFES typically surveys kind of more senior folks or folks with PhDs, people on the very, very specific end of the spectrum, whereas the Department of Labor was probably looking at kind of the more general public. So they might have captured more the safety engineer type crowd. So that's it for chapter 1. We're going to end here and pick it up again in chapter 2.